All right. Good Saturday afternoon, later afternoon, depending on where people are going to tune in for this. I'm excited for today's guest. They just put out a great, awesome, I can't say enough good things about this record, but Brian Link of the Icarus Plan is joining me today to talk about this record, and it's called Some Kind of Sign. It's a deep one. It sounds like it's a pretty personal record, and I'm just really excited to dig into your mind and get into the nitty gritty of it, man. Thank you for coming on.
No, I appreciate you having me. Yeah, we can talk about whatever you want. It's all good. I'm certainly excited to talk about the album or anything else.
Yeah, that's exactly what I want you on here for, man. It's just going to focus on the album mainly. The plan is maybe at a later date that maybe have you come back on, maybe see if Ed would want to come on with you somehow. Where I think he's based in Memphis, right?
Yeah, but we can pull them all in. It's all good.
Right. That's cool. Do like a deeper dive into Icarus Plan for that one. But for this one, I'm just going to say, let's open it up to you, man. And let's just dive right into this record, man. Tell me when it started for the production of it, when you kind of started to map out the plan for it. When did it all start kind of brainstorming for you?
Yeah, I mean, plan's an interesting word. So if you know anything about us, and maybe a lot of people don't know a lot about our writing process, but um, it's a bit chaotic. Like
Mm-hmm.
we don't have like a really well thought out plan. I didn't come to the studio with a hidden book of songs and that I was going to pour through and see what was good, what wasn't. Um, so we started on this album. It was a year and a half ago. So I talked to our
Okay.
producer and close friend of ours, Dave Cowell, and he's recorded and produced everything that we've done, as the Icarus Plan. Um, that Christmas, right before the beginning of last year, and and we were just supposed to like, hey, let's get something together, get some time on the books. And the idea was, what if we, normally the way that Ed and I would write would be almost like passing notes back and forth,
Uh-huh.
virtually. Right? So it's like he's in Memphis, I'm in Atlanta. He'll come up with some ideas, and then I'll kind of like reason over them and be like, hey, what hits me, and then I have some things that are mine, and then I bring with me as well. I write all the lyrics and all of that, all the vocal melodies and things like that, but we split, a lot of accountabilities in different ways in terms of how the music comes together. But what I
Right.
talked to Dave about for this one is like, what if we just like, you know, didn't come in with anything? I just booked up, 3 months of time, and we'll just sort of like really bunker down and just kind of figure out what it is we have to say, and just write. And so we did exactly that. It was really cool. So right around mid-January, I live in Atlanta, and so I went
Right.
to Memphis and over to Dave's studio. Um, and Yeah, man, it was like the moment we sat down, we just started to figure out what it was we wanted to say. And I think the first song we wrote was actually Casting Shadows. And then either Slip Away or The End Can Wait, one of those three. Those were like the first, few that we put together. And we're like, oh, this is cool, and it just started to like come to life and become a thing. And then, after we finished, sort of one track, just kind of framing out what it was going to be, we were
Uh-huh.
like, well, what else do we have to say? And yeah, we just did that for 3 months. And I drove back and forth over the weekends back home, see my kids and my wife and family and all that good stuff. And spent my weeks, splitting my brain in half, like living in the studio and then also working any day jobs I have and any other commitments I got in the background. So
Right.
yeah.
I mean, it for what it's worth, man. I love the approach that you guys took with this. Is kind of coming in with nothing and just letting things kind of, I guess, naturally occur in your mind. Maybe capturing things in the moment. So like
Mhm.
it came across more honest, more genuine. Um, at any point in this process, did you guys ever catch yourself kind of feeling like, oh, I might be forcing that part a little bit. Let's take a step back and then look at it and just kind of get back in that headspace so we don't try and make something sound maybe too perfect or too, I don't know, streamlined. I don't know if that's the right word to use for what I'm trying to ask you.
Mhm.
It, encounter any kind of challenges like that?
Yeah, I mean, look, there were plenty of ideas that are, somewhere in the corner of a dusty trash bin, right?
Uh-huh.
Not everything we do, works the second time or the third time. Um, and like, I mean, like, I mentioned that song, "The End Can Wait." That song originally was, a step or two lower in terms
Mhm.
of just its singing, and I think that it was a lot slower originally. We tracked it from beginning to end, like, this feels weird. Like, it feels like I could go do more with it within my range later on. And then it also felt kind of slow. And so even though it was done and we were like, this is great, we were like, let's start over on it and, tear it all down and just kind of revisit it. And that happened more often, than not. But it wasn't like, it's not laborious, right? It's not like a thing where you're
Right.
like, it didn't feel like a burden. It was like, it's fun. It's like you're putting something out and kind of like putting your signature on it, and you hope it all fits together. You have no idea what the end product's going to be, but it works. I mean, this is a process that we sort of teased out a little bit whenever we put out trauma bonds, like
Right.
the song "An Empty Frame," for example. That was one that Dave and I just sort of wrote, um, you know, and didn't have any plan to write. Just kind of came out of us, and there were one or two other tracks like that that just sort of just spilled out, and that's kind of what gave us permission, or at least like some level of confidence, that we could kind of come in and just create things from the ground up without having to worry about what the expectation was. The only like rule or expectation I had, or we talked about, was like, let's just not leave anything on
Right.
on the table. Let's just
Right.
make sure we explore it all, and we approach it like authentically, and and it's something that we can walk away with, and even if nobody else in the world loves it, like, we love it, and that's kind of like a good measure.
I agree with that. If you love it and you're really proud of what you do and you got your stamp on and you release it out into the world, when the right people hear it, they're going to hear that in the music. I heard it in the music, like from top to bottom, from when Casting Shadows starts to when This Is Who We Are, the last track on the album, plays
Mhm.
and it ends. I just had this feeling in my head of like, this is probably one of the most kind of honest and human sounding records I've heard in quite some time. And I don't know if it's because of how you guys wrote it, trying to take the pressure off of expectations and just like maybe direction that you're going to go with it, like how heavy, were you going to flirt with like more electronics, kind of more cinematic kind of sounds, or things like that.
Mhm.
I was talking with a friend at my job about it, and he was asking me, he's like, so what kind of bands, if you could give me like a frame of mind, would you say that this Icarus Plan is kind of like? And I'm like, well, it's not that they sound like these bands, but I guess kind of frame it in your mind. Maybe you could think of bands like Breaking Benjamin, or
Mhm.
something like that, or Star Set, something like that. And he's like, oh, and as soon as I said Star Set, he was thinking, because that band's like very cinematic, they're very
Sure.
big.
Yeah.
And I'm like, yeah, you could say that about the Icarus Plan. Their songs are definitely big. They got huge choruses, man. Like your guys' choruses, especially on this new album, just they live in your head and they just don't
Cool.
go anywhere. Like your vocal harmonies and just the way you laid out the riffs and everything like that, man, it just fits so perfectly. Yeah, hi, bud. With the record. And so he goes and he starts listening to it. And the next break we had, first thing he said is like, ready or not, he's like, that's probably one of the wildest riffs I've heard in a song in a long time. He's
Yeah.
like, it had me wanting to drive, just go back out in my work area and just drive through the warehouse just as fast as I could, just the way it amped him up. But anyway, I'm kind of getting away from where I was trying to go
No,
with
you're good. It's all good.
that. But what you guys set out to do with the record, I think you accomplished with the way you wrote it
Mhm.
from the ground up. Makes it feel, just like I said, very honest, very organic, and it just works. So I would just say be very proud, and it sounds like you are, what you guys accomplished. Was it Ashes of You was the first single, correct? Or,
Yeah, that was the one that um, felt like a nice introduction to like what we were putting together. It's also, I think,
right.
it's a really cool track. Um, you know, it's kind of funny because it's got that vocal bed, you know, in the verses and sort of like in the instrumental sections. And Dave and I used to, you know, we would work really, really late into the night, lots of coffee involved, and just like, you
Uh,
know, lots of delirium. And I think as we were writing, like something like Lord of the Rings or something like that happened to be on in the background and
really?
muted, right, just in the TV in the room. All we could talk about was how it was just sounded like these elves were coming, and like that kind of became like, oh, what if we did this cool vocal bed, and that sort of took off into that song. But the Ashes of You was sort of our introduction into the way that I wanted the art for the album to kind of show up. I wanted to tease out this idea of like this symbology and this, you know,
Mhm.
this mysterious figure, and then really just kind of like say hello because we hadn't put anything out for like a year and a half,
Right,
and just sort of reintroduce people to what we were doing, and
right.
it was cool. People liked it, and so you know, so far so good. You know, it served as a nice entry point to the album.
Oh, I definitely agree with it. It's a song that it's you can put that. I don't know if it's on the radio yet, but you probably destroy the radio with that track, man. Like it would be up there with like the Breaking Benjamins and the Shine Downs and the 3 Days Grace, you know, in my head, and contend with those bands with ease, in my opinion. And just to be completely honest with you, and I love Shine Down, I love 3 Days Grace, you know, I
Mhm.
love Breaking Benjamin, but your songwriting between you and Ed, just not with just this album, but even the stuff before this album, to
Mhm.
me is just a step above those bands. Like it's just it feels like it comes from a more human place, because I read on your guys' website that you kind of write in an autobiographical kind of way, and that makes it
Yeah,
relatable, like really relatable, you know, with
yeah.
lyrics and. But
It's, you know, I mean, so look, I mean, I thank you. That's really cool. I think you know, we know some of the guys over in Shinedown and some of these other
yeah,
folks, and so nothing but respect for those guys and what they've done for, you know, music, especially for rock. You know, I think rock was supposed to be dead, but it
it's
doesn't
supposed to
seem like
be.
it's dead. So I feel like we're doing okay and we live okay. But that's good company, so I'll take the compliment. But I think, you know, for me, songwriting is a weird thing, right? Um, I'm a pretty private person. I don't like, you
Right,
know, people like to. I've been accused of like trying to make the band seem or feel mysterious. It's not. I just am private and like I would much rather be here and writing somewhere in a studio and putting things out and letting you listen to them than like having to be in the room and be the guy that's like, you know, in the center of
right,
attention. And so, you know, for me, it's like when I write, I treat a song two ways. One, I want to make sure that I feel like I've got something to say, you know, crack a window into like my world, you know, and leave it to you if you want to take it as, you know, oh, is this a real lived experience, or is this, you know, more, you know, hyperbole, or is it, you know, some metaphor or
right,
whatever. But then I also know that like the moment that any artist puts a song out, like that song no longer belongs to them. Like that's not my song anymore. These songs don't belong to me anymore. They belonged to me the day before I released the album, but now they're everybody else's songs. And so it doesn't really matter
right.
what the song means anymore. It's more, is it something that means something to you, right? I think there's something cool and sort of special about that. And I think if you're, you know, a lot of people will ask like, well, what's this song about? It's like, you know, I can tell you my interpretation of the song, but it doesn't matter anymore because now it's yours. And so I think there's something cool and beautiful about that, but it becomes easier to make that transition if what you're doing comes from a place of honesty to begin with, you know?
I completely agree with you. It translates through to the listener. I've never liked music that sounds contrived or forced, or I mean, not to say there's anything wrong with fabricating a story in your mind to write about, because there's a lot of bands that do that, and it's fine because
Mhm.
it's writing about it, you know. But I connect more with the song when I could tell that it's from that personal space, and I even put my own meaning on, you know, like just for
Yeah.
an example, I want to say "Just Let Go." That song I kind of connect with my wife, because she could be a really kind of tight wound person, high stress. She has a lot of anxiety a lot of the
Right.
time, And just the song title itself of Just Let Go, I put her to that song and connected her to it because of what I felt like it was trying to say. Just letting
Mhm.
things go, letting things lie where they may, or whatever, is a way to just kind of take the pressure off of your shoulders or a weight off of your shoulders. I don't
Yeah.
know if I'm off the mark with that, but that's kind of what I got from the song. So, I mean, I get it.
Yeah, I mean but
um,
that's when you think about your life, right? Like maybe not everybody does this, but I do. My life has a soundtrack to it, you know, and like there are places that songs take you when you hear them, right? Somebody
right.
may hear a song and they may just hear the lyrics and something that they've heard on the radio, but for you, that might be like, your second day of like ninth grade, or it could be like, your wedding day, or it could be, some tragic thing that, it helped you get through or helped you understand. Whatever the thing is, like, that's sort of where music lives in my world. And so, you know, uh, I think it's cool, and it's really personally gratifying to know that there are people that, have created some space for like my music or things that we've said or done, um, to kind of live in that space because that's sacred space, right? That's your world, and so now somehow I've
Yeah.
become a brick in your house, and I think that's really cool. Um, you know, so yeah.
I mean, I love hearing that stuff. It's um, music's like that for me too. I've never really created it, but it's always been like a vehicle to carry me away from some kind of problem or maybe whatever I'm feeling. And I think with the Icarus Plan, not to say that I've been listening to the Icarus Plan for a long length of time. It's probably only been, you could call me a newbie for all intents and purposes. I'm pretty sure that back when I was working at another job, I downloaded the album before this one and was listening
Mhm.
to it. And somewhere along the way, I consume a lot of music, right? So it's not a matter of getting bored or just anything like that. But I'm always searching for something, right? So somewhere
Yeah.
along the way, the Icarus Plan kind of got moved over here, and I found this band, and I'm filtering through them, and I'm just searching through that. And then I put my phone on discovery mode for iTunes just
Mhm.
a couple weeks ago, and Ashes of You came on, and I'm like, I know that voice. And I get to a red light, and I tap my phone screen, and I see the Icarus Plan. I'm like, that's got to be new. And lo and
Yeah.
behold, it was. And so I had to contact you because I wanted to get, kind of catch up with you and talk about it. And when you said,
Yeah, for sure.
spoiler alert, new album, I'm like, I had no idea there was a new album coming out. As lousy fan I am. Um, but I want to just get back to this album itself, man. And just, I
Yeah.
want to bring up, was anything hard for you to write lyrically on this album when you talk about how personal you are, the private person you are?
Mhm.
Putting this stuff out onto a pen and paper, writing about experiences of your life, is that hard to do?
Yeah, because anytime you tell anybody anything, you there's that fear of like, judgment, and there's a fear of like being open and sort of like allowing people in. Um, and then, like when I was recording this album, 3 months it's a long time to kind of like process things, and it's a
Right.
long time to kind of live and marinate in that world. And then at the same time, like while we were recording and writing this album, my father passed away,
I'm
and
sorry to hear
so
that.
that's no, I thank you. But like that bled into you know the process. It just kind of does. Like you live in that space, and so which is not to say that like I'm going to point out like songs where like here you can see this is grief and this is whatever, but
Right.
you know it shows up, and on the one hand, it's like there's something serendipitous about it because you have like this ability to be cathartic and to really kind of like try to tackle some of these things in your world head on. But then like, sometimes you just like wish you would have left some doors closed. You know what I mean? Like, um, so yeah, I mean, it's tough. I don't know that I could pinpoint a single one that like really was burdensome over another. There's certainly some that are like technically harder than others. to perform and to feel like we got it right. But like, you know, I'm lucky in that like most of our experiences with the writing process, with the recording process, it's been fairly effortless, just generally speaking. It feels like it's just sort of like, you know, like you hear people say like, "Oh, that song wrote itself." Like a lot of this stuff kind of just did kind of write itself. I mean, Dave and I, sat down and smashed our brains together, and like this album happened. You know what I mean? Um, and like there were some things we just did it because we were like, "Hey, I wonder if it would be cool if we did this." Like when Ready or Not, you brought that song up earlier. Ed is the one who came up with the guitar riff for
Okay.
the verse and
Yeah.
things like that. And then Dave and I, while we were recording it and going through it, I was like, man, it would be really cool if like I had this bridge that almost sounded like this 1960s sort of throwback with like this little strange little melody that comes in and then like completely juxtaposes against this more
Uh,
aggressive sort of whatever. And then the whole thing has like this, it's just sort of written with this shit-eating grin of like, just kind of like taunting
yeah.
whoever, is on the other end of whatever vitriol is coming out of my mouth. And so like I appreciate like just my own sense of humor and my own like style. Like I love moments like that. So we looked for areas where we could create some space for some things like that,
Uh-huh.
where it was applicable. Um, I think the hardest thing, if anything, was just sort of in the beginning giving yourself permission to like look at a blank slate and say, "I'm gonna go fill that slate."
Hey, bud.
So is that our newest member?
Yeah, he's 6.5. Oh, I'm sorry, buddy. He doesn't like when I have things playing on the TV that he's watching on his tablet. So he wants that off of the big screen so it's his own world.
I
But
take it.
anyway, sorry, you were saying.
No, man. I mean, that's like just going into a place and giving yourself permission to kind of create is scary, and you don't know what's going to happen. So when you go like, "Hey, what are we going to do today in the studio?" and it's all mapped out, and you kind of know what you're doing, you can go home, you can
Uh-huh.
rehearse, you can go do all the things. You know, where it may not be obvious to you, but some of the things that were you hear on the album, they may have been the first or the second time I even ever sang them, right? Like we some of the lyrics we wrote on the fly in the booth,
Mhm.
and it just kind of came out. Not everything. Some of it was, I don't want to act like we're so unprofessional and ill prepared that we just kind of like fake everything, but like, there was a lot of that type of energy, and it takes a lot of trust, to be able to do that. And
Oh, for sure.
and yeah, I mean, so that was probably the hardest thing. Once you become sort of emotionally raw, then it's just, you got to just trust that the other person's going to stop you before you fall over some sort of an edge. Um, and that's what I've got with the folks that we work with, and certainly what I have with Dave, our writing partner, and yeah. Um, it was just I don't know that there was any particular song that was like super scary, or anything to that effect.
I mean that's not a bad thing or good. That's just is what it is. This album came together in a really natural way, from what I'm gathering. And I wanted to bring up Ready or Not again and just tell you that when I first heard the song, what I thought you were alluding to was the kind of, I don't know if the right word is shallowness or naivety of maybe people that see someone in another spot in life and they envy what they have, because you're like, oh, so you want to be the big shot in the room. And
Mhm.
like another thing that my mind went to is like in connection with like the music industry, like
Mhm.
big labels and like how they might treat someone up and coming, the deal they might give them, and then they get on the other side of that and realize it's not this glamorous or always fun thing. Is where I thought you were going with for Ready or Not. It
Yeah,
personally.
you're not far off. I mean, look, we all know people who have to be, the center of the universe,
Right.
who want all the credit, that don't do any of the work.
Yeah.
Um, and sometimes they get it, and then it becomes really clear that 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 veil that they wear is paper thin, you know, and it's easy to pick apart. And you know, without intending to sound vindictive or like it's all Schadenfreude or whatever, like there's a level of like, and I like comeuppance that comes with that, where you can sit back and sort of grab the popcorn and watch the
Mhm.
thing play out and say,
Right.
you know, did you get everything you wanted, out of
Mhm.
whatever this is, you know? And to be able to not, I wrote it from a perspective of like seeing that, acknowledging it, calling it out, and also just not giving it any power, I just saying, it's easy for me to let go and to walk away from that. So I hope it was worth it.
Yeah, I know a lot of people. I've known a lot of people in my life that kind of do or have been through what you kind of touch on with that song, and it's
Mhm.
relatable in that sense. And I just want to let you know it's probably my favorite track on the album. Uh, just in
Cool.
tone, the chorus is probably my favorite on the album. Maybe I fight with the chorus of "The End Could Wait." I love that chorus, man. The way you laid that out in that song is just. I don't think you could have done it any better than you did for that track. Like it's, if I had to name my most listened to, it's "Ready or Not," "Slip Away," "Ashes of You," "The End Could Wait," uh, "Just Let Go," "Casting Shadows," and "This Is Who We Are." Just
Yeah,
I listen.
I love all
Like
those tracks. Yeah.
yeah, I just bravo, man. I keep nailing it or keep saying that to you, man, for this record, but I really do mean it. I'm nerding out just talking to you about it and being able to pick your brain about it. And
Yeah.
I really hope that people feel what I felt when I first heard it from top to bottom, because I want to say it's probably going to be my album of the year. We'll see what else comes out. You never know, but
Yeah, I mean, I might have to get back in the studio. We'll see if I can beat it before the end of the year.
challenge accepted, I guess, for a CD. If you could get me saying, I concede, you're right, you beat it. But
No, it's all good. I love all those tracks, and they're all kind of like, I mean, and even some of the ones that I know that, they're not every song is for everyone. I think that's totally cool, right? But like, there's songs like "Last Call" and like and "Lights Out" that like for me are special because of what they do. And um, I love the Scars That Hurt the Most because it's one of those like almost has this nasty late 90s, synth kind of thing going for it
absolutely.
under this disgusting guitar. And you know, it's got a little bit of a weird pop vibe to it, but not really, and but like This Is Who We Are, that song just kind of takes me places whenever we get to play it, or if I get to, just sit back and listen to it after the fact. And especially when we were recording it, um, I knew that that was one that like I felt like if there was a risk, honestly, like on the album, like when we talk about like the music or the songs, like the two that I felt were the biggest risks in terms of, am I going to divide a fan base or am I going to push people away? But I was pretty convicted about them having a place on the album. Were Just Let Go and This Is Who We Are, because they are different, right? And I
They're very
acknowledge that,
different.
but like they don't feel like a different album or a different artist. They're just different from the rest. But like, they hold a really special place in, the the genetic makeup of this album and like of that whole experience. And so, um, for me, like This Is Who We Are is probably like the most personal song, even though it's not lyrically challenging. Just because of where my head had to go
Hmm.
whenever we were writing it. This feeling of like watching everything around you burn, but finding something beautiful to be able to start anew with, is
Yeah,
kind of like at the
that's
core of that
relatable.
song.
Yeah.
And then like Just Let Go was just fun. Like I mean, I remember when we started to write it, it was like we were working on something completely different, and it wasn't good. It was, we were trying to find a vibe or something in it, but it just wasn't where we wanted to be. And so we just stopped, went to go get some dinner, and we started just talking about things that made us happy. And we ended up like talking about a couple of tracks from Silver Sun Pickups and a couple of other bands that are in that sort of vein. And immediately like something clicked, and it was like we had this frenetic kind of like scramble back to the studio, and then what poured out was Just Let Go. um, and like to me, like the surprise of that song was almost like, it was just as evident during the writing process as it
Mhm.
was like, maybe whenever it shows up on the album. So yeah, I I can scroll through mentally every single track on the album and just sort of give you less about what the song's about and more around like, what was my headspace during that time. And and it's a trip to be able to sit here a year and a half later and say, oh, now it's out and we had all these really cool people touch it and work on it and mix
Mhm.
it and master it, and now I'm able to talk to folks like yourself and others about it. So it's cool.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you, man. And I've got one touch a little bit more on those two songs that we were just talking about and say that when I
Sure.
got to Just Let Go and when I got to This Is Who We Are, I did actually think exactly what you were describing with those songs about kind of how they're like a little bit of like departures sound wise for
Mhm.
the record. Because let's just be honest, like the record itself has got a pretty heavy tone to it.
Mhm.
Like, the I don't know what tuning you guys use for the guitars on this record. It sounds like some kind of drop tuning, if I'm not mistaken.
I
Uh,
mean, I mean, I think that it varies as you go up and down the stack. So I don't think we didn't explore any kind of tuning. Um, so yeah, but I mean, like it's different, but I mean, it's not different for us. Like I
right.
think the last thing that I put out before this album were songs like, when we did the reimagining of the song Crash,
Hmm.
and I put out the song Violent Red,
Hmm. Yeah.
which is just me and a piano, and like, you know there's nothing heavy or dirty about the music or instruments within that track, but like you kind of leave that track feeling like you listened to something really heavy and really kind of like
I know
dirty and
exactly what
vulnerable
you mean.
you
Yeah.
know and so like that's just kind of been our vibe since the beginning. um I never want to put anything else out that feels like it's like a weird collection of just misfit toys, right? I don't want to do that, but you know there's a cohesive that feels kind of accidental, a cohesiveness that feels accidental with everything that we've done. um and in the beginning it really was accidental. I mean, it was like,
Right.
Ed and I writing a thing and being like, hey, this is cool, it's COVID, both of us are going nuts, let's just work on some music. And then that matured into, let's finish the back half of that album rather than just a bunch of collection of singles.
Right.
And what does that look like and feel like? And then we said, cool, let's go into this smaller space with the EP and put together Trauma Bonds, which was, had like a duplicity to it, where it was like half heavy and half kind of like, sort of oriented around piano and these organic, moments. And then to this, right? Like being a little bit of a different experience. Um, but it's not different if like just sort of our style. It just may sound different from the last thing we did, which I hope will always be the case. I hope the next thing I do doesn't sound like this, but it has its own unique kind
Right.
of like thing, right? Where it still fits in the overall thing. I could go play all these songs, from any of the albums at a show, and it wouldn't feel like you're at 5 different shows. But, I do want you to have like a multi-dimensional experience, because I don't think we're one dimensional as people. And so I don't know.
No, I,
I
I
wouldn't show
definitely
up that
don't.
way.
I definitely don't get the impression that with what comes after some kind of sign that it's going to be like any kind of repeat or rehash. I feel like you're definitely a band that creates, and it's always going to be something that's going to be, yeah, maybe familiar, but it's not going to be a repeat of something before. And I
Yeah.
100% respect that. That's exactly what I love with music. Of course, you got really successful bands like AC/DC or
Sure.
other bands like that that kind of do pretty much very similar albums back to back, but they're really good at it and people love it. For some bands it works, for other bands it doesn't. Other bands just like to do what you just described. They like to experiment, explore whatever avenue that they can, and just see where it goes. So
Yeah. I mean, if it's not fun for me, and if can't feel like I'm doing something new, then I don't know that it's gonna be fun for you as a listener,
yeah,
or anybody else. I mean, um, I also don't want to get music's really hard. It's really easy, but putting yourself out there is really hard. And so like there's plenty of bands and songs that like I don't vibe with, but at the end of the day, like anybody that can put a piece of themselves in front of somebody else and
right.
say, I'm going to be vulnerable and let you now judge me, right? and now you become like part of a ranking system, or you somebody's favorite or less favorite, or your derivative because you sound like this, and you're like, at the end of the day, I just wanted to write a song. Um, so I can't knock anybody that is brave enough to withstand that, you know. And I hope that they do it for reasons that like are meaningful to them,
Right.
you know. Um, and I hope it's fulfilling to them, whatever the thing is. But you know, I'll never knock it. So
I think that's a good headspace to have with it. Respect what people do. Um, and then just I want to touch on just
mhm,
overall. You mentioned a little bit beforehand that you've gotten messages from people in Australia and some other parts of the world since the
sure.
album's been out. It's been a few
Yeah.
days now. What's
Yeah.
overall the encompassing or whatever you want to say reception for the entire album so far?
Well, nobody has told me they hate it, which is good.
Good.
Um, it's people have been really cool, and so we talked a little bit before we jumped on here, but like it's I some of my bands before the Icarus Plan, where they were more traditional, you
Right.
know, get up and go tour and go do all the things and just grind it out. I had a lot of good success and cool moments in those
Right.
spaces, but like you know, it's it's different. Like the world now is just different, right? It's like there's so many different outlets, which is really cool, in some respects, but then it's daunting in others. But
Oh,
the world's a
absolutely.
lot smaller. You know what I mean? It's like it's not it used to be, hey, can I go tour like the East Coast or the West Coast and do these regional things or whatever the thing might be. And then now it's
Right.
like, somebody hitting me up at 7 o'clock in the morning in Atlanta from New Zealand or Australia and saying, hey, I'm listening to your new album, which doesn't even come out here for another however many 16 hours or whatever the thing was at that
Right.
point. And it's just weird. It's weird. It's wild. It's like, suddenly like the world seems really small, and like you can
Right.
have these connections with people. And if I go scan like where are our listeners at, like I feel really blessed in that like I see Sao Paulo, Brazil, I see Argentina, I see Germany, I see Australia, I see and then from coast to coast across the country and beyond. So it's just cool, man. Like and we have people that are older and people that are
Right.
younger, and they'll kind of like slide into our messages and just have said really really positive things. And some people really like checking out our audio when we put it out. Some people really love like the art that we kind of like put together. Some people, love like the YouTube stuff we put out. We put out a lot of like, lyric videos and fully produced videos and things like that because it's all about content. But yeah, I mean, people have just been really warm to us throughout this whole journey, which is cool. And
It's a blessing.
yeah, it's humbling, man. It's a wild, you know, it's a wild thing. I'll never sit back and say, "Oh, this sucks." This feeling, it's cool. So I haven't been brave enough to figure out what songs are vibing with people. I can see what's showing up and peeking its head out in our, on our numbers as I go and scan all the various outlets. But you know, I haven't I haven't been brave enough yet to go venture out and say, everybody give me
You'll
all your
get there.
feedback because I don't know if I want it.
I think
So
eventually the curiosity will get the better of you. You'll go peek around and probably most likely be very pleasantly surprised and happy that people are just loving every song, or saying what their favorites are, and that reflecting in the numbers and on Spotify and all that. You mentioned artwork, by the way, and
mm.
I have it written down that I wanted to ask you, how did you come up with the cover art for this album?
Yeah, so I have worked really since we put out the song "The Garden,"
Right.
which was one of like I think our third single or something like that I ever put out. Um, Before I knew I was going to put out albums or whatever, and I
Right.
didn't even know if I was going to like keep making music. I was just sort of like trying to figure out if this is something I wanted to keep doing for a minute. Um, I started working with this artist. His name is Chris Lott, and he's fantastic. And he's just sort of like in the same way that I've worked with Dave, and the same way that I've worked with the same like video people. Like I just really like small teams because I feel like small
Uh-huh.
teams can do big things. And so he's been our guy since the beginning. And so I talked to him, really around whenever I published the first record on vinyl, and then thinking about Trauma Bonds, and then really with this one, really delve deeper into the
Right.
cohesive sort of nature of the art. For this one specifically, I had all the songs down and they were recorded or well underway, and I was really trying to figure out what I wanted the vibe to be from an
Right.
artistic perspective. And I kept going to this almost like this alternate future. It in some ways it's unintentionally but unapologetically like similar to like what you might see
Right.
in imagery in like movies like Dune and whatever else, but it's not intentional. But I wanted to go to this space where it was like people are like rediscovering something, like some lost language, some lost thing, and you don't know if they're you know you don't know if it's somebody's recipe book, you don't know if it's like some message of important, or in this case if it's a portent, some series of warnings that you're supposed to be able to like adhere to. And so and then I think even I started to look through the lyrics of all the songs and see if there was anything that resonated with me. And there's just a line in Slip Away that keeps poking out in its head, and it's this, coming at me like some kind of sign, right? And so I
Right.
just really latched around that idea. And then I think this is going to sound really bougie, but I was like on a vacation. I think I was in Hawaii, and I think I was probably relatively drunk. And I had this like moment where I was like, what if it was some kind of sign, and then there were these series of symbols and signs, and we created this almost oracle like figure
Right.
that could like be the messenger of all of these different things, and use that as a mechanism to kind of push people into this world and kind of build some underlying mythology to like what was happening. And so I know what all the symbols mean, I know what all the things mean, but it's not important. Like it's like I'll never
Right.
tell anybody those things, because what's more important is that that there's something there, but now you can kind of see it and piece
Yes.
it together in the same way. It's this lost sort of language. And that was almost the way that like it felt metaphorically true to the way that we approached the album, which was like I wanted to sort of rediscover what was there and
Mhm.
start from nothing and then piece it like a complete thought at
Right.
like a level of mystique there. So that
Uh-oh.
started to uh, like the again. And that's just sort of where we lived. And then everything else I put out, Wasteland and Ashes, and anything I put out in the future will
Right.
feel like it's. And so, yeah, man. I don't know how interesting that is to people, but like that's how we got to where we are.
I mean, I nerd out to stuff like that. I love hearing concepts behind like album art and just ideas in general, because from an early age, I thought like that. I just build these worlds in my head, or I would draw something I dreamed about, and I would go around and I'd show my mom, or I'd show friends at school and ask them what they thought of it and how they interpreted it. And of course, when you're young, how deep you think probably varies, right? I would draw, Dragon Ball Z characters and hold up to somebody and ask them what they thought it was, and they'd either recognize it or not. Or I would draw just like take a bunch of coloring pencils and just smudge colors together. But in my head, I was like basically saying that I was confused in my mind about something, and all the mashing up of colors was a representation of that. But I absolutely love the cover art for this record. I think it's very well thought out. I love the imagery of it. I love the colors. It does really make me think of kind of like an Ashes kind of thing too. The colors of it. And when I was looking at like those little symbols beneath the figure there on the front of it, I was sitting there like, so does that say some kind of sign? But I was like counting the number of symbols there, and I can't say that it made sense that it would be some kind of sign that was spelling out. But I
Yep,
love that
it's
it was
not.
getting. I love that it was getting me to think about it, though. I love that it was getting me to think about who the person was or the entity
Mhm.
was on the album itself too. And then the little symbol above her. Like, I think
Mhm.
that's really smart because it had me thinking.
Yeah, I mean, if you won't have seen the last of the symbology, as it relates to this album. You've probably already seen it if you've seen any of our, lyric videos, or
Uh,
if you look really closely at like our singles that we put out so far, Ashes and
yep.
Wasteland. You might see some of the symbols that are in here sort of popping their head out on the cover. Um, I don't know if I'll ever go into any level of depth of like what's actually happening. Maybe one day, we'll see. Never say never, but um,
For
what I
now.
what I like more is just the idea of everybody just kind of like building their own world with it, right? And kind of their own interpretations. But it was really for me just about unearthing this new sort of beginning, or
Mhm.
this new thing, this new language that had been lost, and just there's something kind of cool and romantic about that.
Yeah.
Which isn't to like say like, hey man, like this album we're putting out is the first of its kind and it's going to revolutionize music or anything to that net effect. That wasn't the point. It was just that was the
No, I
vibe
get it.
that
Yeah.
I was able to you know sort of like find this through line. Uh, and yeah, I dig it. And then you'll always see I say always, at least for the foreseeable future. Um, I I worked for companies like Nike and other companies for a really long time,
Right.
so brand is important to me. And so I've just sort of fallen in love, and even from the very, very early days, uh, just anchored myself around the little logo that we've got. That you can see our oracle figure, or whatever you want to call her, staring up and sort of like having flood above her. And so that's been a through line since the beginning. So I don't see it going away. It may change its importance here and there, but that's always going to be sort of our signature stamp on things.
I love it. And I actually agree with you. Keep it under your hat what the symbology is, what the symbols are, who she is, definitely, because it's going to keep a level of mystery and just for yourself, like
Mhm.
knowing something that the fans don't, and always having them wondering how close they are to being right for what they represent. I honestly really do think that's really smart to just keep under your hat.
I just think it's fun because it's you
Yeah,
get to, here's a bunch of tools, and then you go tell
yeah,
me what it means, and then the beauty of it is that you're not wrong because that's what it means to you. Just like we talked
yeah.
about earlier with songs, like it's what the song means is whatever it means to you. It doesn't matter what it means to me. Like what it meant to me is that was what was required to get it out the door. Like that's what was required to make it so that it could hit tape. But what gives it life, like that's not me. Like I did that part, to give it life. That's on you, that's on
Right.
whoever listens to it. And the same thing with these, the art and any kind of art, right? I just think it's really is the beholder, that holds the power when it comes to things like art. And so, yeah, man, I will always be the first in line when it comes to subscribing to like saying, hey, I'm gonna go put new tools or things in the toy box that people can go play with. And you know, I'm always game.
Yeah, I'm kind of the same way with that. And then just to kind of start wrapping it up,
Yeah, sure.
uh, could we dig a little deeper into just overall how it actually feels? Because you sent me a message on Facebook about, man, it's crazy that this is actually out now, or it was going to be out. Just overall, just uh, how do you actually feel that it's actually now out? You don't have to think about it anymore. You don't have to wonder about how it's going to be received, and just kind of see where it takes you. What's the overall feeling so far with that? Is it kind
Yeah,
of a weight lifted?
I don't know. It's weird. It's this one probably is just more personal than others, just because of everything that went into actually putting it out. Um, it's also one of the longest durations of time, like the space between when it was recorded and the space to when it came out, that I've ever waited. I don't know that I'll do that again. It wasn't intentional; like it just kind of like happened. The world just sort of worked that way. Um, life gets in the way sometimes,
For sure.
but you know. there was something about this where it was the further I got away from when I created it, the more nervous I became about releasing it, because it
Mhm.
becomes almost like it's like putting a period at the end of a sentence. You know what I mean? It's like saying, "Am I really done with that thought?" You know what I mean?
Mhm.
And then now, like, I got to figure out, do I pick up the pencil and write another sentence? Like, am I going to go start another thought, or what do I do with this thought? Is it the right thought? And you have all these thoughts, that sort of roll in your head around it. Um, and it's hard not to give that headspace like power.
Uh-huh.
And so putting it out, and starting to get that release cycle going, was good because it was allowing for me to, take a different type of breath. Um, I won't say that I haven't worried about how it's going to be received, or, are people, am I obsessing over how it's going to do? I mean, I think I've tried to be less obsessive over it since it's now sort of hit the airwaves. Um, but I mean, yeah, I mean, I'm human. I want people to like it. I want people to love it, and I want to, you know, I want it to find, you know, people's ears and live there. Um, but it's a different kind of worry. Like,
Uh-huh.
it's now out there, and you know, it's like putting toothpaste back into a tube. You just kind of don't, right?
Yeah.
Um, and so now it's sort of like the way that my brain works. I immediately start to think about, well, what do I do next? Because I need to figure out, like, how do I pivot away from this, and or do I embrace it further and just kind of roll with
Right.
it? I don't have any shortage of people calling up saying, hey, can we go play, various shows or tours or do all the things. um and then I'd love to, like, revisit some of these songs and do some reimagined versions of them, some
Well,
stripped
that'd be
down
awesome.
versions or whatever. And then there's some stuff that was left sort of on the cutting room floor from even back when we did Trauma Bonds. I've got a ton of stuff that's just not released yet. um and I don't know if they'll ever release it, but, like, it just hasn't made its way out yet. So it's just now having to sort of fret over, like, what do you do next? And what does that become? So it comes with its own pros and cons. Like I mentioned, whenever we recorded this, I went through a lot of ups and downs personally,
Right.
and it is somewhat therapeutic to have this now out in the world. I think that's pretty cool. Um, you know, and I could look at it, if nothing else, and say I don't have any regrets about it. You know, um, I will obsess over it. I will hope that people like it. I'll probably get my feelings hurt when they don't, because I'm a real person. But
That's
at the end of the
understandable.
day, like, it's out there, and, like,
Yeah.
I can feel good about that. And so, I'm excited about that. But the journey is just sort of beginning with this one. I mean, it's 48 hours in, and I have a lot of, you know, peripheral content I'd like to create, some
Mhm.
videos, and do some potential,
Oh, yes.
you know, maybe some live streams of just, like, sitting down with a guitar and a piano or something and playing some of these things. I don't know. I've got a lot of thoughts in terms of what I'd like to do.
I'm
Um,
down.
so yeah, man. I mean, that's kind of like, it's fun to be able to start that process of thinking, even though, like, that comes with its own, like, stress and energy. So
Yeah. Well, any final thoughts regarding some kind of sign and what surprises might be getting planned for it? Do you want to let anything out of the bag or just keep
I'm gonna
surprise?
keep letting people accuse me of being overly mysterious. I
Okay.
will say we're not done. Um, when it comes to releasing some content surrounding this. I'm really grateful. We've had a really, really good response, and a lot of people that have streamed already across a number of platforms. Um, I think, if anybody wants to help, the best thing they can do is just spread the word. Just listen, and, you know,
That's why I'm here.
uh, yeah, I mean, listen, and it's okay if not everything in there is for you, and it's also okay if you feel like, you know, sometimes you don't know where you fit in these things.
Right.
And, like, that's certainly where my brain always is, and I have this imposter syndrome that I sort of live in and marinate in. But, like, if anything that we do can help people feel like they belong to something, then
Makes it all
then
worth
my
it.
yeah, my world is
Yeah.
complete. So
Well, again, man, I want to just thank you so much for coming on, taking some time out of your day to talk about the new record.
Yeah.
Just again, I want to reaffirm and just reiterate the fact that I think it's an amazing album. It's so well put together. You know, it's diverse, but it flows really well. There's some surprises on it that, in the context of everything, do really work very well with the album. And you know what I'm talking about. Just Let Go and This Is Who We Are. Brilliant songs. I love them.
Thank you.
And to those listening, please go out, check out the album. It's out on all major platforms. Yeah, I believe they each song was uploaded to the YouTube. You go on there and then scroll through that.
Yep.
I saw them there. And please go to the Icarus Plans, all their socials, Facebook and all the usual ones, and just show them love. Congratulate them. Let them know we're here. Support them. Let's blow this album up.
Yeah, and listen, we'll have. I will say that there will be some, certainly some merch and some, vinyl and
Yes.
things like that. If people are wanting to have things in their hands, we have that on our site now for the previous albums.
Yeah.
There's actually not many left, so I would encourage people to move on it. I think a lot of that is starting to go away, but we'll repress, if we need to. But this one's in the work too, and I'm a sucker for things like vinyl and these tactile experiences, and so hopefully it'll be cool. But no, I appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, thank you.
We're happy to come back with Ed and
Absolutely.
maybe Dave or whoever we can follow up later.
Yes, please.
Thank you to anybody for listening. I appreciate it.
Yeah. This will be available as soon as I hit the end stream button to share around. I'm going to share it around. I am going to get the review up for the record as soon as I get that written up. Have a few reviews that I need to get out and done first before I get to this one, but it is coming. But again, thank you for coming on, Brian. I've had a really great time talking about this record with you. Please enjoy the rest of your day. I hope it's a great one, and we'll stay in touch for sure, man. Thank you.
Sounds good. Thank you, guys.